hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. Write all your answers in the listening question booklet. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to section 1 on page 2 of your question booklet. Section 1. You will hear a woman phoning to inquire about sailing courses. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6 on page 2. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Hello?
Oh, good morning. I'm calling on behalf of my 13-year-old son, Jacob. He's interested in learning to sail.
Great. Well, we have what we call a taster day on the 22nd of June.
I'm not sure he can make it, but we'll see.
The taster day is on the 22nd of June, so 22nd June has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Hello?
Oh, good morning. I'm calling on behalf of my 13-year-old son, Jacob. He's interested in learning to sail.
Great. Well, we have what we call a taster day on the 22nd of June.
I'm not sure he can make it, but we'll see. Jacob's really interested, though. So can you tell me about the courses?
OK. We have 2 types of courses for children under 16, 2-day and 5-day.
Could you explain the difference?
Well, the 2-day one just covers basic techniques in sailing. And on this course, the kids always sail with the instructor they've been allocated.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, and the cost is £65.
Oh, I thought it was more than that. I heard it was £125.
That's for the 5-day course.
OK. I presume that course goes into much more detail?
Yes, and from the 3rd day, the kids are given the choice to sail on their own if they want. We use the same types of boat, but we help them learn more techniques, in particular how to manage the boat in a variety of types of weather.
I think Jacob would enjoy that course. Do you give them a certificate if they complete the course?
Absolutely. We give them out on the final day, which a lot of the kids really like.
Great. Could you tell me a bit more about what the children have to bring and so forth?
Well, the most important thing is the clothing. It goes without saying that whatever the time of year, they should have plenty of warm clothes, as it can be quite cool out on the water.
What about footwear? Do they have to wear anything special?
The only rule is that they've got to have shoes of some kind. They mustn't have bare feet.
OK.
And we suggest the kids pack an extra pair of trousers, waterproof ones. They don't have to wear them unless it starts to rain.
Fine. So basically it's just using your common sense.
Yes. Oh, and one other thing we do say is that the children mustn't wear jeans, because they get extremely heavy when they're wet.
Oh, OK.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10 on page 2. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
One thing I forgot to ask is whether it's possible to get a meal anywhere.
I'm afraid not. But we do have a shop called the Marina Stores where he can get a snack.
OK. And before I forget, when I drop Jacob off, where can I park?
Good question. There's spaces near the entrance, but you have to pay for them. But there's no charge for the car park just by the bridge. Do you know it?
Oh, yes, I know where you mean.
Now, we do need you to fill in a registration form. You should send that in a couple of weeks before the course starts. The form is on the website, but we ask you to print it off and add your signature.
Yes, of course. What sort of information do you need?
About your child's swimming ability, any special requirements and so on.
Will you need to know who his doctor is?
Yes.
We've just recently changed surgeries, so I'll make a note to get that.
And one more thing. There's a separate form on the website, which is optional, that asks whether you're willing for photographs to be taken during the course.
Yes, of course, no problem.
Great. So, I'll send you...
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2 on page 3.
Part 2. You will hear part of a radio travel program about a tourist resort called Stanley Island. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Welcome once again to the show where we give you travel tips on popular tourist destinations in the Pacific region. And today, our focus is on beautiful Stanley Island. Now, before we get started, a word of warning. The seaplane service to the island was discontinued last week, so for the next month at least, the sole link to the island is provided by the Old Ferry service, since plans to run a hovercraft service to the island have been delayed. So what is there to see and do on Stanley Island? Well, the main tourist areas are on the north, south and east coasts of the island. As far as recreation goes, in the south you'll find several leisure parklands such as Waterworld and Fantasy Island, which seem well equipped and reasonably priced. If it's golf you're after, the 18-hole course in the south of the island is currently being turned into a conference centre. But don't despair, there are 2 excellent courses just 30 minutes away on the east coast. The south of the island has many large resorts and hotels, with plenty of children's activities and clubs. This part of the island caters mainly for those seeking luxury to medium-class accommodation, but the east coast has basic apartment complexes with fully equipped kitchens, so that at least you can cook for yourself. For those who like to get back to nature, you'll probably find the south coast rather overdeveloped. The rainforest areas on the west coast are largely inaccessible because of the surrounding mountains, but those on the north coast are within easy reach, and a local agency runs guided treks through the jungle. If you're into water sports, all of the areas have something to offer.
Before you hear the rest of the program, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now, here are a few bits of advice for those visiting the island for the first time to make your stay safer and more enjoyable. The island is generally safe, but it's as well to take a few precautions. If you're on any medication, bring this with you. It may not be available on the island. And it's also a good idea for everyone to pack some insect spray in their luggage. If you're thinking of going into the more mountainous region in the west of the island, let someone know where you're going. And remember, the reception for your mobile phone may be unreliable, so don't depend on that. Take your own water. Don't drink out of rivers. You're likely to come across lots of monkeys. They're cute, but watch out, as they can bite. Finally, when you're back in the more inhabited areas, take a break from steak and do try the local seafood. It's fresh and very good value.
That is the end of Part 2. You now have 45 seconds to check your answers to Part 2. Part 3. You will hear a business student called Laura talking to her tutor about some research she is planning to do on employee absence. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hello, Laura. Have a seat. So, I understand you're planning to investigate absence from work for your research project.
That's right. I'm going to base it on a local company called Burcock Engineering.
Is there any particular reason why you've chosen Burcock?
Well, I'd originally thought of asking another company, FG Engineering, because I did my placement there and I knew the staff there, but the CEO wasn't very keen. But she knows the managing director at Burcock, and she spoke to him, and then he got in touch with me. Apparently, absence is a major problem there, so he's quite interested in having it investigated.
OK.
So, my central theme is absence, but I'm thinking of concentrating on long-term absence. I thought that might allow me to give more helpful feedback to the company.
If I were you, I wouldn't be that specific. I'd look at absence as a whole. You might get more interesting results.
Oh, OK.
So what's the main thing you expect to find? Rises in absence rates over time?
Not really. Initially, I wondered if workers often take time off without real justification, but I think that'll be hard to determine. So, well, I think I may find that it's something to do with what sort of job the employee is doing.
OK. Now, have you thought how you'll get your information?
Well, first of all, I need access to the company records.
Yes. Obviously, you'll need overall absence figures, though it's unlikely they'll let you have them for individual workers. And you probably won't have access to personal information like when they were born, but you should be able to use anonymous details like the type of work they do or how long they've been with the company.
OK.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
So let's think a bit more about your questionnaire.
I know that it shouldn't be too long or people get bored.
No, but if it's too short, you don't get enough information. The trick is to get the balance right.
I think the questions should be closed questions too. I mean, where people choose an answer from a list.
But then you miss the chance of getting unexpected information, so I'd include 1 or 2 open-ended questions too.
Okay. And I won't ask for names or addresses or anything.
No, it needs to be anonymous. And after you've drafted it, you need to give it to at least one person to check there aren't any problems. So you need to leave enough time for that and any revisions necessary.
What about the covering letter that I'll send out with the questionnaire? I'll need to introduce myself and explain what the questionnaire is for, but what else should I include?
I'd reassure people that the survey isn't going to be used to assess them personally. Otherwise, they might choose not to take part.
Yes, I'll make that clear. And what about when they do it? Will they be allowed to use work time?
That's really up to their manager, but you should say roughly how much time it'll take.
Okay.
So now you need to produce a schedule with dates. For example, when you'll send out the questionnaire.
Yes, okay. Once I can arrange that date with the manager, I'll be able to fix the deadline for getting the completed questionnaires back. And I want to use the time in between to analyse the figures that HR is going to give me from their database, though they haven't said exactly when I'll get them.
And you have to submit your assignment by the end of June.
Actually, I have to get it finished by the 2nd because I've arranged a work placement after that.
OK?
So our next meeting is 2 weeks today. Is that still okay?
Yes, and in the meantime, I'll send you an email.
That is the end of Part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 3.
Now turn to Section 4. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer in development studies talking about transhumance. That is the way groups of people move from place to place with their animals. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about what may be a new concept to you, the movement of people with their herds of animals from place to place. This is known as transhumance. These peoples are pastoralists, and their animals include cows, sheep, goats, horses, camels, and reindeer. Now, researchers sometimes make a distinction between 2 types of transhumance, fixed and nomadic, and talk about various factors which differentiate between them. The first and most important distinction they make is to do with the climate. Fixed transhumance occurs in countries such as Switzerland, where seasons are predictable in terms of weather and timing. Nomadic transhumance, on the other hand, is generally practiced in areas where climatic conditions are difficult to predict. An example of such a location is Somalia, as the anticipated rains often just don't appear. Secondly, researchers sometimes look at the type of journey that pastoralists make, their movement. For fixed transhumance, the pattern is sometimes known as vertical because it typically consists of a journey from lower ground in the winter season to higher ground in the summer, and vice versa. In the wild, of course, animals frequently follow these kinds of migration patterns themselves. Nomadic transhumance generally takes place over a longer distance, and it's far more complex. The actual pattern varies from year to year, and it's determined primarily by the animal's needs for grass and also for water. Another distinction is sometimes made in terms of homes. In the case of fixed transhumance, the group will typically have permanent homes in the valley and a shelter which is semi-permanent in the mountains, such as a cabin, to offer some protection from the weather. In nomadic transhumance, however, the pastoralists always live in temporary shelters, which are transported by their livestock from place to place, and are usually light and portable. In northern Kenya, for example, the Gabra pastoralist carries the frame of his home on his camel, and then covers it with branches when he stops for the night. A fourth factor often mentioned is the number of people taking part. In the case of fixed transhumance, only the people who actually look after the herds travel. These are normally the young ones because they can withstand adverse physical conditions more easily. By contrast, in nomadic transhumance, the whole group moves with their livestock. The last points of comparison often made by researchers are diet and goods. In fixed transhumance, those who do not move from the valleys often start working as farmers, cultivating the land. They build up contacts with other communities, and in some cases, they may also trade animals for grain. In nomadic transhumance, there are fewer contacts. The group are generally regarded as providers of all their own needs, and they obtain food such as cheese and meat and also their clothing from their herds. Another example is found in Algeria in North Africa. To see how far this model applies to transhumance there, fixed transhumance from valley to mountain pastures is common in the area, but some recent pastoralists also take their herds on longer journeys at the end of spring, from the Sahara in the south to the plains in the north, where there is more abundant rainfall. They have traditionally assisted local farmers with the harvest, which takes place while they are temporarily a resident there. We have to decide whether their move would fall within the category of fixed or nomadic transhumance. It is true they live in tents, and these are movable and temporary right through the year, whether they are in the Sahara or in the north of Algeria. So, in considering their homes, they appear nomadic. On the other hand, in relation to their patterns of movement, they do not. They drive their livestock through the same passes and mountains each year, which suggests fixed transhumance. Here, in fact, we have a case showing some features of both types of transhumance, which we might more precisely refer to as intermediate. This all goes to show that you should treat every theory with great care, and not force your case history into a model if it doesn't fit.
That is the end of Section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.